The sweltering summer sun beat down mercilessly on the old farm, suffocating the air, making every breath a struggle. There sat Jeremiah Carter, his frame bowed by decades of relentless labor, hands resting heavily on knees that had known too much strain. Beside him, his dear wife, Ruth, pulled her worn shawl tighter, a chill in her heart despite the high sun. Their bodies were tired, yes, but their eyes, oh, those deep, warm, proud eyes still held the untold saga of a love so vast, a sacrifice so profound that no one seemed to recall it anymore. They hadn't been born to luxury, not even to comfort. Yet, when the opportunity arose to open their home to three abandoned children, Michael, Sarah, and Daniel, they never hesitated. Skin color? That was inconsequential to Jeremiah and Ruth. What mattered were open arms, overflowing hearts, and a humble farm that barely yielded enough to survive. Those children became their universe. They were carried on aching backs, fed from plates that often held too little, and every last penny was painstakingly saved for shoes, for books, for a chance at a life far better than their own. But now those children were grown, and the reward the old couple had dreamed of, the comforting presence of family in their twilight years, had evaporated into a chilling void of silence, distance, and utter contempt. How could they have been so wrong? One evening, Ruth's trembling hands clutched the kitchen table as she watched Sarah casually toss expensive clothes into a suitcase. Michael, leaning against the wall, his face a mask of irritation, spat, "This place is nothing but dirt and dust. We can't live like this anymore." Then Daniel, the youngest, chuckled dismissively, brushing past his mother as if she were invisible. "You think we're staying stuck here? Please, we've got lives to live." Ruth's lips quivered. She reached out, her fingers barely grazing Sarah's sleeve, her voice a fragile whisper. "We gave you everything, our darlings. Every drop of sweat was for you. How can you just turn your backs on us now?" But Sarah avoided her gaze, zipped her bag with a cold finality, and pulled away. Later, neighbors spoke of seeing the three figures vanish down the dusty road, never once glancing back at the home they were abandoning. Some shook their heads in silent disapproval. Others murmured, perhaps the Carters raised them too soft, or maybe those kids just wanted more than this poor farm life. Oh, the injustice. Jeremiah stood rooted in the doorway, a silent sentinel watching the dust of their departure settle. His calloused hand gripped the doorframe, veins bulging, but no words escaped his tight lips. Beside him, Ruth slowly collapsed into a chair, her breath catching, as if each retreating step of her children was tearing life from her very soul. The old farmhouse groaned in the night wind, an emptiness now echoing through its halls that it had never known. For the first time in decades, the Carters were truly, utterly alone. What a cruel fate. Seasons bled into one another, but the Carter farm remained frozen in its sorrow. Weeds choked the once vibrant garden, barns sagged precariously, and fields that once brimmed with harvest now whispered only silence. Jeremiah rose before dawn each day, not out of purpose, but out of a habit that clung to life. He'd shuffle to the porch, sink into the same weathered chair, and stare at the barren fields, silently begging them to forgive his failures. Ruth, meanwhile, grew frailer. Her hands, once nimble with needle and dough, now trembled lifting a simple cup of water. Neighbors would spot her, a wraith in her old shawl slowly traversing the path between house and porch, her steps uncertain, her gaze fixed downwards. Pity was in their eyes, yes, but also whispers, "Such a shame." One woman sighed to another, "They raised those kids like their own, and look how they've been repaid." "Blood or not," the other countered, shaking her head, "you'd think adoption meant something. But those children, I don't think they ever truly saw Jeremiah and Ruth as real parents." The Carters didn't hear those words, but their sting was felt in every averted glance, every hushed silence. The children never called, never wrote. They were out there somewhere. Michael in the gleaming city, wearing expensive suits. Sarah, a flurry of exotic vacation photos. Daniel, tucked away in an office he never bothered to mention to his parents. The Carters knew only through the meager scraps of gossip tossed their way by neighbors. A flyer with Michael's face for a law firm, Sarah's name in a society column. The old couple would listen, nod calmly, their hearts quietly shattering within their chests. Jeremiah desperately fought to keep the farm alive. He patched roofs with mismatched timber, wrestled rusted tools to mend broken gates, his hands cracking in the biting cold. But the very soil seemed to mock him, the fields yielding nothing but dust. Then, on a frigid winter morning, Ruth collapsed in the kitchen. The sound, a dull thud, pierced Jeremiah to his core. He rushed in, his knees buckling as he gently lifted her, his voice hoarse with panic, calling her name again and again. Her eyes fluttered open. "I'm just tired," she whispered. He held her for hours, her frail hand in his, willing her breathing to steady. That night, as the wind rattled through the farmhouse cracks, Jeremiah lay awake, staring at the ceiling, a chilling thought echoing. Was this the end? Two forgotten souls, abandoned, left to fade away, unmourned and unloved. Oh, the crushing despair! But destiny, silent for so long, had not yet written their final chapter. One fateful evening, while repairing a leaky beam in the neglected attic, Jeremiah's hand grazed a loose plank. Behind it, amidst the swirling dust and deep shadows, his fingers found the rough edge of an old wooden chest. It had been hidden there for decades, patiently waiting. Jeremiah stared, bewildered, as if it had no right to exist in his desolate world. His hands trembled, pulling it free, the wood groaning a sigh from a forgotten past. Heavier than he expected, coated in cobwebs, its brass latch green with age, it held an undeniable aura of forgotten secrets. For hours he sat cross-legged, his rough fingers tracing its surface, hesitating. It held the weight of generations, of lives lived and lost on this very land. With a final, trembling resolve, he pried open the latch, the click echoing like a clap of thunder in the silent house. Inside lay stacks of brittle papers, folded letters, and thick envelopes. At first he dismissed them as mere forgotten correspondence, yellowed and inconsequential. But then he unfolded one document, and his breath hitched. It was a deed, his family's deed, revealing that their humble plot was part of a sprawling property, rich with mineral rights buried deep beneath the earth. His own grandfather had signed these papers half a century ago, ensuring legal ownership for Jeremiah's bloodline. Proof: the Carter farm, outwardly poor, was in fact a treasure trove of untold value. Jeremiah clutched the papers to his chest, tears streaming down his weathered face. All those years of relentless struggle, the hungry nights, the humiliating days of being mocked as just poor farmers. The truth had been right there, above their heads, all along. What a revelation! When he carried the chest downstairs, Ruth sat by the fire, her thin hands folded. She looked up, weary but her eyes bright with a spark of curiosity. As Jeremiah spread the documents across the table, he explained, his voice hushed, pausing in disbelief himself. Ruth leaned closer, her eyes widening. "Jeremiah, you mean to tell me all this time?" He nodded slowly, emotion tightening his throat. "This land isn't worthless, Ruth. It never was. It's been holding something incredible, something bigger than us all along." They took their time. Jeremiah spent weeks in town, consulting a lawyer who, with each document, raised his eyebrows higher in astonishment. Soon, whispers began anew, but this time, not of pity, but of fervent curiosity. Neighbors watched as men in expensive suits arrived, pacing the property lines, measuring, pointing. "What are the Carters up to?" some muttered. Others scoffed, convinced it was just another dead end. But the couple's quiet resolve only deepened the mystery. At night, Ruth would gently stroke the brittle edges of the papers, as if they were fragile jewels. A faint smile, the first in years, touched her lips. "Perhaps," she whispered, "this is God's way, giving us back what we lost." Though their home remained humble, and their clothes still hung loosely on their tired bodies, a new light now shone in their eyes. The tide was turning, and the children who had so cruelly abandoned them had no idea what unimaginable fate awaited them. News, especially good news, travels like wildfire in small towns. It started as murmurs in the general store. "Did you see those men in suits at the Carter place?" Within a week, everyone knew the old farm wasn't worthless after all. Oil? Developers? No one knew for sure except for Jeremiah and Ruth. And then, as if drawn by the irresistible scent of money, the children reappeared. Michael's sleek car was first, its tires spitting gravel, his polished shoes a stark contrast to his father's worn boots. Sarah followed, her dress far too elegant for farm dust, her smile brittle and forced. Daniel swaggered in last, offering a pat on his parents' backs, a gesture of warmth that rang utterly hollow. They filled the old kitchen with a cacophony of feigned chatter, forced laughter and exaggerated affection. Outside, neighbors peered from their fields, muttering under their breath. "Look who's back," scoffed one man. "Didn't see them when the roof was caving in, did you?" Another shook her head. Now that there's talk of money, suddenly they remember who raised them. Oh, the audacity. Inside, Jeremiah sat quietly, his weathered hands folded, a calm resolve in his gaze. Ruth, beside him, seemed fragile yet remarkably steady. They listened as their children spun tales of family, of staying connected, of making up for lost time. But beneath their hollow words pulsed a greedy expectation. A ravenous anticipation of the inheritance they leave was rightfully theirs. When the lawyer finally arrived, his briefcase heavy with weighty contracts, the children practically lunged forward, their names poised on their tongues, ready to claim the wealth they felt they so richly deserved. But Jeremiah's voice, low and firm, cut through the eager silence. "This land," he declared, his gaze unwavering, "was never about money. It was about sacrifice. And sacrifice, my dear children, is something you three never learned." Michael's practiced smile crumbled. Sarah's eyes darted nervously. Daniel muttered a curse under his breath. The lawyer cleared his throat and began to read. The mineral rights and land, valued at millions, were being transferred into a charitable trust. This immense wealth would fund struggling farmers, support adoption centers, and establish scholarships for children who truly understood gratitude. Not a single cent, not one, would go to the children who had so cruelly turned their backs. The room froze in stunned silence. Sarah's jaw dropped. Michael slammed his fist against the table, a roar of outrage escaping him. Daniel stormed out, spewing curses into the evening air. But outside, the menors who had gathered whispered with profound approval. "Justice," one man breathed quietly. "That's true justice." Ruth reached for Jeremiah's hand, her grip weak, yet filled with a newfound certainty. For the first time in years, they felt an incredible lightness, a profound peace. They had not only preserved their legacy, but had ensured it would live on through countless others who truly knew the value of love and selfless sacrifice. That night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the old couple sat on their porch, fingers gently entwined, watching the wind dance through the fields. The house still creaked, their bodies still ached, but their story, their immense sacrifice, had at last found its magnificent meaning. The children walked away empty-handed, but the Carters' legacy, it remained eternal and powerful. What a triumph of the human spirit.